Hello, and welcome back to Iron Butterfly Podcast. My name is Megan Jaffer.
And I'm Katie Hopkins, and we'll be your hosts.
We created Iron Butterfly Podcast in honor of Eloise Page, the original Iron Butterfly. And on this very special season, we are going inside our first documentary feature film titled The Power We Hold: Stories from Women Spies. This film features 10 of the most powerful women you've never heard of, and this season, we'll get up close and personal with each of them. We hope you find their stories as powerful as we do.
So where did you go after Hawaii?
Okay, my son was born in Hawaii. I came to DC and I attended a program. At the time it was called the Joint Military Intelligence College. Now it's the National Intelligence University, where they take service members and people from across the intelligence community, and you get a Master of Science in Strategic Intelligence. I think it's a really underappreciated educational. I mean, anyone who's gone through it absolutely understands and appreciates the value that it brings, but a level of training and exposure that is not available to you in the military. And so there are other students from NSA, DIA. I met a guy from the Secret Service there for the first time. A variety of agencies and just really an exceptional educational program. So I did that, and then I did 2 years at the Pentagon. I had no idea I was going to spend a third of my adult life in Washington, D.C. I thought that was so every weekend was like a different monument or Smithsonian or Mount Vernon or, because I had no idea I'd be coming back many times. But it was great for my kids and my family. A year at Fort Leavenworth, that's a typical educational experience for Army majors. And then 4 years in Korea with my family.
Oh,
and
wow. How old were your kids at that point?
They were 1st through 7th grade.
Wow.
Yeah, so my son was 1st through 4th, and my daughter was 4th through 7th. And it was an exceptional experience for us. Really, frankly, we often reflect the best years as a family were spent there in Korea. I think in part, not just because it was a super cool assignment and a super cool experience, but they were also the age where your kids don't hate you yet. And, they want to hold your hand when they go downtown or, it was just, I love that age,
Oh, yeah. And also Korea is a very outdoorsy place.
Oh, yeah.
If you get outside of Seoul, It is, all mountainous.
Yeah.
Did you guys live there at the same time?
So I think we've talked about this before, and I don't know if we overlapped or we just missed each other, because I was there from 2002 to 2007.
I was there 2000 to 2004.
Oh, so
and
we
you
were
at Yonsei, right?
I was.
I thought I saw you in a coffee shop.
I'm sure you did.
No,
I'm sure
in
you did.
the Norebang.
I was definitely there.
Yeah, you were doing karaoke all night.
I definitely did that, which is just wild. It was really wild. But, I'm sure you did a lot of hiking, or hopefully you were able to do that.
Skiing. Yeah, that's really kind of where my kids learned to ski. And just experiencing the culture and the cuisine, as well as travel around Asia. That was very informative for my kids. You can, like, in less than 90 minutes, you're in Beijing. And,
that's the cool part about Korea is you can, or Asia really in general, is that you can, just like we can bounce to states, or if you're in Europe, you can bounce to countries. You're able to, you could go to anywhere, right? Thailand, Philippines, Mongolia, China.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What was it like planning your career with also your husband who was in the service and also young kids where you're moving all the time and all over the world?
Yeah. So we were, both my husband and I were in the Army on active duty for 9 years, and then he retired. He's 9 years older than me, so he had reached a point where he was retirement eligible, and it was becoming challenging. We're getting our kids up at 5:30 every morning to drop them off somewhere, and then they can't be in any after school activities or sports or clubs because we're at the Pentagon. And our little first graders falling asleep at the table, when we're supposed to be learning to read, but we get her up so early. So he chose to retire. When we were both on active duty, this is part of why we went to Hawaii and then we went to DC. I knew we needed to go to places that had lots of jobs, and ours was not hard to pair. He was infantry, I was intel. They're both pretty big career fields. I knew that I could not apply for that one SIGINT job in Australia, but I also knew that I wasn't going to be like a recruiter in a, remote state that I don't want to go to. That we just had to go to places that had lots of jobs, and that worked fine. And then he retired and stayed home, taught the kids to read, coached sports, head of the PTO, that kind of stuff. And it was really good. But I don't know that I was ever planning my career, that much. I mean, you kind of go where you're told to go. And something that we've talked about before is, when you retire from the military, all of a sudden there's no one telling you where to go.
Yeah.
There's no one who's telling you what the new criteria for excellence is. You get to come up with your own, and there's no one who's ever going to count how many push-ups you can do again, right? So, I mean, all of a sudden you are setting your own goals, and that can be a little disconcerting, because you've been told all along where you're going to go. I think I only once got to ask for an assignment, and that was Korea. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. And when did you get your first star?
2014. Yeah,
what was
just
that
come
like?
Back from Afghanistan. Oh, it was exciting. I mean, it was cool. But I've had this conversation with other folks too. I mean, it's neat, but you want to get promoted, and that's exciting when you get promoted. But you're doing a good job because you want to do a good job. I think there can be a distinction between those who take hard jobs or work really hard because they want to get promoted, and those who take hard jobs because they want the hard job, and who do a good job because they want to do a good job. It's a subtle distinction,
Totally.
but the promotions were great, but it was never, I'm going to take this job so I can get promoted. It was, I want this job in Afghanistan because I want this job in Afghanistan. And it is a job that people often advance from, but that's not why I want it. I want it because I want to do that
job.
Just
one more thing on promotions, just because I think we've been to promotions, and if you're lucky enough to witness one, it's very special. No matter how many stars, it's very special. But I do wonder, usually the person that is pinning you, is that the right verbiage?
Yeah, sure.
Is someone that you know, and that's why it's so special. Do you get to pick that person?
Oh, so you get to pick like the family members that are going to I want my kids to do this sleeve and my parents are going to do that sleeve, the actual physical pinning. You pick those. The officer who is promoting you is typically your boss. It's a matter of circumstance. But you get promoted a lot. Or some people do. Yeah. And everybody gets, even a private becomes a private first class, becomes a specialist, unless they're getting kicked out of the Army. And from about my last 5 or 6 ceremonies, I kept telling my family, this is the last one. And so you better fly here from Montana to see it because I'll never have another one. And I continued to have them, and my sister and her family, she dragged them from Seattle, and they'd attend these things. And she's a vascular surgeon. She speaks at international conferences. She's the head of a national level organization, but they don't have promotion ceremonies, right? You graduate from med school and then you're a doctor. And I remember one time, my little nephew turned to his mom, my sister, and said, how come you never have parties like this? Because, it just...
it's a good question. Yeah. We should all throw ourselves more parties.
and I think that the military celebrates these things in a way that I found my civilian counterparts don't necessarily. Maybe when you become an SES, but like when you go from like GS 12 to 13, there's not a special ceremony in the office, and
the only comparison I could give in the civilian life is a retirement, where like it's
over.
This is the last one.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So you also spent quite a bit of time on some deployments. Will you talk a little bit about that experience?
Well, I've talked about the one in Iraq and Syria, which was absolutely my favorite. That was great. okay, I should back up. I was in Korea for 9/11. And I was in Korea until 2004. And so, the whole nation is mobilizing. I mean, I'm on the other side of the world, but it feels like the whole nation is mobilizing. Everyone's wearing support the troops things, the little yellow magnets on the back of their cars, and soldiers from all over are deploying to Iraq and Afghanistan, and I don't get to go. And, as someone who's itching to be, Princess Leia or the chick with the sword. I mean, I loved what I was doing in Korea, and it was a great team, but I really, really wanted to deploy. And whenever I'd call from Korea and say, what's next for me? They'd say, you're going to the Pentagon, which is why I stayed 4 years. I kept extending. I was like, I don't want to go to the Pentagon. So I'll stay in Korea another year. And then finally I was like, okay, I'm not going to stay for 5. And so I came to the Pentagon for a year and then 2 years at Fort Meade, and I was desperate to deploy. I felt like I was the only colonel in the Army who hadn't been downrange. And so I snagged a key assignment. I'm going to be the Deputy Corps G2 at 18th Airborne Corps, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I'm down there, leave my family in Maryland, sleeping on the floor of an unfurnished apartment in Fayetteville, North Carolina, so I can be on this team. It's very exciting. And I realize this isn't your question, but I'm thinking of all these anecdotes.
No,
and I remember this preparatory exercise. I'm actually a lieutenant colonel. And it's a 24/7 exercise, and I'll pop in period. I'm kind of like an evaluator to get folks ready to go. And in my breaks, because I can't stay up 24/7, I go out to the cab of my little Ford Ranger pickup, and I try to sleep in the front seat, curled around the gear shift because I drive a stick shift. And and it's hot. I can't run the AC, which means I crack the windows, and then the mosquitoes come in, and I'm like, God. And I thought, you've been doing this over 20 years. I mean, you are 42 years old now. This is not what any of your friends' mothers are doing. And you are retirement eligible. You were only going to do this for 4 years. You don't have to keep doing this, as I'm swatting mosquitoes in, North Carolina in the middle of the night in my Ford Ranger. I said, is this really what you want to do with your life? And I reflected on it and I said, yes, it is. I was still just burning with this fever to do this. And so as you're preparing to deploy, you get your teeth cleaned, you get an anthrax shot, you get all this other stuff, sign wills. And we posed one at a time in front of a flag with a little Marine beret in the colonel's office. And we laughed and joked around while we were doing it. But we all knew that this is the picture they'll run in the paper if you're killed.
Oh, wow.
Right? It's very, And
did you talk to your kids about that?
My kids were very upset. They were teenagers. That's a whole nother story. They were very upset. And I had a hard time reconciling, my deep desire and passion to essentially leave my family, right? And go to Iraq. I mean, it was all I wanted. And I still feel guilty about that. So can't have it all.
Yeah.
And this is what I was choosing. And I feel bad about that. But they said, oh, you're over 40. You should have a mammogram. And I'm like, okay. So I go and I have a mammogram. And I don't know if you've ever had one. You might not be old
I have not
enough.
had one yet.
Well, when you do, don't wear deodorant. They'll tell you that because it can obscure the film. And I forgot. I mean, it's habit, right? You put it on every day. Yeah. And so I go forward to Baghdad as part of the pre-deployment site survey, and calling back every day. And I talk to the sergeant major, and he says, hey, when you get back, they want to see you at the hospital. And I said, oh, I know what it's about. I said, I wear deodorant. Don't worry about it. And so I go around like Saddam's palaces and, these ballrooms and gold-plated toilets that soldiers are using now every time. It was just bizarre. And I come back and I show up at the hospital. And every military installation has its own kind of culture and ethos. And Fort Bragg is the home of 82nd Airborne, 18th Airborne Corps, Army Special Forces, Delta, all this. Is very rough and ready, even the civilian nurses. So, I'm sitting in this waiting room with all these mostly wives, middle-aged women in blue paper gowns, and the nurses come in, and they're like, Hopkins, Jaffer, barking at these women. It's your turn. Get Colonel Gibson, you can come with me. And that's when I knew this is not about my deodorant.
Oh, wow.
And I did not get to deploy. And and so I had stage 3 breast cancer. I thought that, life was over. We have a whole podcast on that. And obviously, spoiler alert, I lived. And yeah, so that's a whole nother scene. But I thought my career was over. I thought, because they said, in fact, it's so stupid. I had such misplaced priorities at the time. And, they're telling me these things they want to do, biopsy and, surgery and all this kind of stuff. And I said, yeah, but when can I get back to Baghdad? Honest to God, that's what I said. And they said, oh, you're not going anywhere for a really long time. They said 5 years at least.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And in those 5 years, I deployed 2 of them. So I went, after I got done with everything, which is about 16 months, tied to the hospital, now Walter Reed, back then it was Bethesda. And then I went doctor shopping, and I found someone who would sign off on my deployment. And but that kind of experience really changes you.
Yeah.
I like to think for the better. I didn't want to hear that at the time, when people say something good will come of it. But and I realized that what misplaced priorities I had, right? This focus on I got to get downrange instead of spending time with my family. And I really appreciate that I was able to spend an extra year with them. And you just really spend a lot of time thinking about what matters most in your life. And sometimes maybe it shouldn't be your career. And it wasn't my career like, I got to get promoted. It was, I love doing this. This is what, and I felt guilty that like being a wife and a mother wasn't enough, that I also wanted to do all this other stuff.
But it wasn't just a selfish thing saying, I want to do this, but you were in service to our country too. Yeah. So it's different. It's not like, oh, I want to be.
It's not selfish. It's purposeful.
It's purposeful.
It is. But, yeah.
No, I get it. Yeah. I just want to say that there was, it's not like you chose.
No, but so you have you go through a lot of things obviously in that time point. And then, so I'm in the war college and with no hair, it's starting to come back. And, I'm still, being treated. And, the Army G2, the head of Intel, calls me and he said, Karen, if you can deploy, I'd like you to go to Djibouti. And of course I said, I'll take anything, right? I'm just glad to be alive at this point. And I said, yes, but I was disappointed. I really, wanted Iraq and Afghanistan because that's where everything was happening. And I thought, what am I, chopped liver, C team? And I get to Djibouti. I was there about 10 days and I realized what a great deal it was.
It is a very strategic
place. And not just that, but, if I had gone to Iraq or Afghanistan as a colonel, you can swing a stick without hitting the colonel, right? They're all lined up at the copy machine making copies for generals. They're like building PowerPoint slides. And here I'm like the senior intel officer in the entire Horn of Africa. Every Wednesday I go down to the embassy, which is about 3 times the size of this room, and meet with the ambassador to talk about, security issues, and I call it my starter JTF, and it was amazing. And I thought, when I'm a little old lady in the old folks home for veterans, everybody's going to have an Afghanistan or Iraq story, but I'll be the only one that, spent Christmas Eve at the end of the runway watching, actually it would be Christmas morning if the sun is rising, watching the sun rise over the Red Sea and looking at the camels and the flamingos. It was an amazing experience. And I'm very grateful for that. So, and to get to see and experience, that part of Africa. We were operating again in about an 8-country zone, and it was, nobody was shooting at us. And so you could travel pretty broadly and just really see and experience this. And then later I went to Afghanistan, which a whole nother story, but I will just share one thing. In Afghanistan, of course, women are not treated well. That's an understatement. And, the whole, head to floor burqa kind of thing. Although when I was there in Kabul, there would be some women, who were not dressed like that. Yeah. It's not that way today, but it was. And when I was in Africa, which was fantastic. And you would see beasts of burden. If you saw someone or something carrying a load down the highway, it was about a 50-50. Sometimes it would be a camel, but most of the time it was either a donkey or a woman. And I think once I saw a man with a load of sticks in Kenya. And but almost all the time, someone with a heavy load was a woman. And I thought, as I would hear people talk about women's issues in the United States, which I care deeply about. But I think, sister, you don't know how good we have it. I mean, just really, eye-opening to see the lives that people lead there.
Yeah.
Or like, I remember we went to Lacasal, LAC. I'm probably not pronouncing it the right French way. It's probably Lacasal. But it's the lowest point in Djibouti. It's the second lowest point on Earth after Death Valley or the Dead Sea. And it's the saltiest body of water in the world. And Djibouti is the hottest, continuously occupied country in the world. And so it's like 130 degrees. It's just god awful. But, and I see this woman who's carrying like jugs of water, and she goes into her hut that was made of skins, literally. And I just thought, oh my God, I mean, just the things we take for granted, the accident of birth, to be so fortunate as to be born in this century, with this kind of medical, care that's available to us, with the, just the quality of life that we experience, in the Western world. And that is just the good fortune of being born in this time and place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you find that experience with your health changed the way that you were at work? Like, you talked about how it reordered your priorities a little bit, but do you think it changed?
I think it made me more empathetic. I like to think it made me more empathetic for people who are suffering challenges. And in particular, as I look back at, there is this kind of thread of expectations of toughness, that started, I could say it started in Alaska in the 6th Infantry Division, but it really started in Montana, of needing to be tough and to never admitting that you hurt. And, there was, you dog people who would fall out of the run, and there were soldiers who, there's a whole code in the the Uniform Code of Military Justice. One of the violations is malingering, and that's faking that you're sick to get out of doing things, right? I mean, it is a real thing, you know, and there are troops that will do that. But there was also an assumption sometimes that if someone's sick, they're, that equating being sick with a moral failure almost, and so there's definitely that thread through my life that I really had to reconcile with when I got cancer, right?
Yeah.
And I think it made me more, I like to think it made me more empathetic. It's funny, it's the first time I realized I was actually a middle-aged woman and not just like a soldier. And, I'm going to like this breast cancer support group in Annapolis, and it's kind of, I've never been to AA, but it's kind of like that. I imagine you go around the room, hi, I'm Karen, and here's my story. And then I get to, and now I don't get to go to Iraq. And these other ladies would say, oh, thank God. And I'd say, no, it's bad. But I, suddenly that's when I took up yoga, and, I had, it revealed a new side of my life that I didn't know, I had. But yeah, I do think it's a survivorship of all kinds. People survive all kinds of things, disease and other things. I cannot help but affect you deeply. And I think it affects different people in different ways. But for me, I am actually grateful to have had the experience, and it is an important part of who I am today. Yeah.
Thanks
absolutely.
for sharing that, because
really.
I think it is important to your story, but important to hear, for others.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, okay, where do
we
you
in
want
the
to
world
pick
now?
up? I guess where do you want to pick up?
So we were in Djibouti, and then you ended up in Afghanistan, right?
And then, Djibouti, and then back to Fort Meade, and then Afghanistan, Pentagon. I did Fort Gordon, Georgia. I can briefly talk about that. I don't want to breathe with every 30 plus years.
No, just do it. I mean, for you, whatever you think are like the highlights.
So when I was newly appointed as a one-star general, and they sent me to a cyber assignment. I really wanted to do intel, but they sent me to a cyber assignment, we were standing up a joint force headquarters for cyber at Fort Gordon, Georgia, to integrate offensive and defensive cyberspace operations in support of military forces. And I was there 2014 to 16, and the Secretary of Defense was poking the Cybercom commander in the chest every day, saying, "You will take on ISIS in cyberspace, which is a little hard. They're not exactly a digital army. I mean, they did have like some pretty sophisticated propaganda, but the beheadings and stonings and things that's happening in the real world, right? But so the first 12 months I came there, and we're just, Cyber Command is still kind of new, kind of being formed, and everything about Cyber Command and everything that they're trying to do, everything threatens some NSA equity, whether it's an extra spot in the parking lot that's not, to, I want to essentially blow up a router that you've spent, 5 years gaining access to. So the first 12 months I come to work and I say, I'm here to defeat ISIS in cyberspace. The next 12 months I say, I'm here to defeat the NSA bureaucracy. And NSA was a far more worthy adversary. I'm afraid I didn't.
Yeah, I believe
I'm
it.
afraid I didn't gain a lot of headway. I have a lot of scars. But
That's
anyway,
hilarious.
So tell us about post-military,
Yes.
because you did something.
I know you've had a whole second career,
Right.
basically.
And I think most people having a full career in the military, when they retire, they're like, okay, I'm going to live out my retirement dreams and just relax.
Right.
That was
and you
exactly
took
my
on
plan.
a very difficult job after
that
military.
was exactly my plan. I retired. I decided I was going to move back to Montana. I build a house on this land that I bought 30 years ago, 5 miles from my parents, and I was going to travel the world while the house was under construction. And I stood up at my retirement ceremony, said nice things to everybody who helped me, and said, and goodbye forever. You'll never see me again. And it was March 2nd, 2020. It was the last event they held at the Women in Military Service Memorial. It was the last time most of my friends gathered as a group or flew on a plane. In fact, my sister, when I went to get her at Dulles for my final ceremony, I'm in the cell lot, and she called and said, I'm just going to rent a car and stay in a hotel. I was like, what's up? She said, a man just died at the hospital I work at in Kirkland, Washington, of that respiratory disease. And just in case I have it, I don't want to give it to anyone.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah. And when I signed out of the Army 3 weeks later, we're wearing masks and paper gloves. And my discharge paperwork, my DD-213, says, leaves the Army with dirty teeth, because the dental clinic had closed and couldn't give me an exam. And so,
That's wild. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's true. It's true. I mean, that's not exactly the language, but that's
Pretty
what it
much,
says.
yeah.
And they tell you when you go through the transition course, especially for senior officers, that one of the big shocks will be you're going to be seeing a lot more of your spouse than you were used to. Nobody says anything about quarantine. So here I am,
my God.
locked in the house, staring at my husband all day, eating the leftovers from my retirement reception. Every night we'd crack them out and watch a television show to survive, celebrate that we've survived another day of.
I cannot imagine a harder transition.
No,
than
well,
that.
I was just going to say,
that is
people talk about thinking about surviving just marriage in general and you've been married how long at that point?
We married in 91, so however many years that is.
20,
almost
30 years, right? Yeah. So surviving 30 years, but that wasn't actually the hard part. The hard part was retiring, going straight into quarantine with your husband, where you're not supposed to be spending 24 hours a day with.
It was like retreat to other corners of the house so that we have something to talk about at dinner. Anyway, so I started dabbling in consulting. I think I did an Iron Butterfly podcast from my house. I started teaching at Georgetown, National Military Strategy. That was a great experience. And then a little less than a year, I was approached to be the Sergeant at Arms for the U.S. Senate after they cleaned house after January 6th. I'll just tell a brief story there because I do think it's a little instructive. Of course, January 6th, we all saw what happened, and I was deeply upset. Just really, I thought, this is what happens in countries I deploy to. I can't believe. I never thought I would see this. Never thought I would see this in my own country. And I read in the paper that this retired Army General, Russell Honore, was going to do a study on some of the House security shortcomings. I thought, that's interesting. I know him. He doesn't know me. A friend of a friend called and said, hey, he's looking for an intel officer. Can you name any colonels that could help round out his team? Because colonel doesn't cost as much as a retired general. And so I made a list, and I looked at it, and I thought, I think they all have jobs. And I slept on it, and in the morning I called him, and I said, what about me? Here's what I bring to the fight or the table. I'm local. I could start tomorrow, no travel involved. And if I could ever do anything to ensure this never happened again, I would want to know that I had done that.
Wow.
And so he took me on his team as a contractor. We're only 5 weeks left on the contract at that point. I mean, my second week, I'm pushing my cart through Giant in the produce section, and my phone goes off, and it's a national security advisor for one of the Senate leaders texting me, says, would you consider being the Senate Sergeant at Arms? We had just given them a briefing on Zoom the day before. I had never considered being the Senate Sergeant at Arms. I really didn't even know what the role was yet. But I asked around, spoke to mentors, and they recommended that I take this job. And I've just said, if I could ever do anything to make sure this never happened again, I would want to know I did it. So I better take this job. People often ask, like, was it on USA Jobs? I go, no, that's
a fair question, though. Fair question.
But I say, so here's the thing. One is networking. So actually, it was a woman in Dubai who called me to say, hey, Russell Honore is looking for someone, because he was using his network, and then she was using hers. It's about networking and and knowing people, and people knowing who you are and what your talents are. To advocate for yourself, which I didn't always do very often. Probably still don't enough. I went to him. He didn't come to me, and I said, I want to be on your team, and here's what I can do for you. Advocate for yourself. 3, you never know when that briefing is going to matter. I had no idea when we briefed this Senate team on what we're finding in the House that they were going to say, hey, what about her? And then 4, being open to new experiences. So I was very grateful to have that job. I served in that role for 4 years. It was an amazing, amazing experience. One of my top 3 jobs. The top 3 would have been that year in Iraq and Syria, being the CENTCOM J2, Director of Intelligence for the entire Middle East, and serving in the Senate. And people often ask, and let me back up and just say, it's a surprisingly broad role. Okay, and I'll just give you a brief bit of history. It's actually in the Constitution, it says the Senate shall appoint officers as it sees fit. And so in 1789, when we started our current system of government, and in April 6th or 7th, 1789, the Senate said, we're going to have a Sergeant at Arms. And the next day they said, we're going to have a secretary. And the next week, or the next month, the House chose a Sergeant at Arms. And in August, we inaugurated George Washington as our first president.
Oh, wow.
So that means we've had a Sergeant at Arms in the Senate longer than we've had a president of the United States.
That's pretty fascinating.
His job was to watch the door, which is the origin of the law enforcement role, to procure firewood, which the Sergeant at Arms team still does. I may or may not have shown you the firewood when you
I don't
came
think
to
I
visit.
remember that.
Yeah, we keep it in the basement. And take care of the horses, which they no longer do, but they have the motor pool, the vehicle fleet, and enforce parking, issue parking tickets around the Senate. And I think James Mather probably had 2 stable boys to help him muck out the stalls. And he'd be astounded today to know that it's 1,000 people, that they manage the leases for the offices, 450 offices around the country. They're responsible for all the IT systems, the computers, the telephones, cybersecurity, the print plant, the post office, the barber shop, guys who make furniture, all kinds of stuff. And I was often asked, what do you miss most about the Army? And I could honestly say very little, because the things that I most enjoyed in the Army, I discovered in that role. And that was, again, leading a team of men and women who are committed to working together for the good of the nation to accomplish something every day. And I found that deeply, deeply satisfying. So to your point, Katie, about, sometimes it's the nature of the job, not the title itself. And I found that aside from getting to blow things up, it was remarkably similar to some of the satisfying jobs I had in the Army.
I love that.
What an amazing career.
I mean,
amazing.
Yeah.
I know she skipped things too.
Oh, of course.
I know.
Of course.
Well,
Yes.
Yeah.
So what are you doing now?
I'm writing a book.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It's going to take me like 2 years, though.
So
it's going to
what?
take as long as
Wait,
you,
this is
as your
breaking
doctor-
news.
Breaking news.
Well,
Hello.
Yeah, it's going to take a long time. So I'm about 85% through the outline.
Okay.
Yeah. So I sat down, they say, give yourself 120 days to write SFD. It's a technical term. I'll say crummy first draft. The S really stands for something else. Give yourself 120 days. So I sat down and started to do that. And I didn't get very far at all. And I figured you can't talk about everything. Like you have to figure out which anecdotes and why.
Yeah.
And, how does it build? What are the themes, et cetera? So I'm taking 120. I'm 85% of the way through. I've just gotten to January 6th of like, what are the anecdotes that I want to include and why and how are they related? And like if you talk at one point about, I was so upset I dropped my coffee cup and it shattered. Well, did you talk about when you got it? Oh, no, go back. So it's taking me. And
That
then,
has to be kind of a fun exercise to just reflect on your own
It is
experiences, like what's
fascinating.
worth including, what
Yes.
details stand out, and why.
Yes.
Are you going to have anyone help you with it? Because I know some people that were in leadership positions had someone that could, because sometimes you
Ghostwriters?
not ghostwriters, no, because you're
Sometimes
clearly
they do.
They do, but I mean more like you will sometimes people
self-censor.
self-censor,
Oh, yeah, for
right?
sure.
So
Yeah.
having someone say, but
critical
what about
early
this?
readers and stuff.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah. No, for sure. But you have to wait till at least after the first draft.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm giving myself
Wow,
time
that's
to do it.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on that endeavor.
Thanks. I'm also, consulting, but I really try to carve out time every day to do a little bit of work on this.
Amazing. What an exciting project.
So I want to just say another kind of Karen Gibson story that I think is really special because you've meant a lot to us from the beginning. And we didn't really know each other in the beginning, right? And we have gotten to know each other because we work on other projects together, which has been really wonderful. But early on, you did something to us. And I think this shows who you are as a person and a leader. And I'm going to tear up probably. I'm already tearing up. But you, and this goes to your, and I'm just going to give you fair warning that we're going to ask you about your code name. And you can keep it or you can change it. And I almost think if you did change it, I think I have
the
one.
sword is too long.
No, it's not.
I don't think
it's not.
it is.
It is not too. So
I don't think it
let's
is.
put
Let's
it on
not
the table.
Rule it out.
But in the first episode, which I highly recommend everyone listen to of yours that you had with us, you told us that you were doing a hike. You were hiking the Appalachian Mountains, right? Yeah. Which you have completed.
No.
Have you not
I
since
still
completed?
I broke my foot in October 23.
Okay.
Whole story. Kicking a marble wall in the Capitol. Long story.
Oh.
And then I got out of shape. And then in 24 was super busy at work and I just didn't get back to it. So I have New Hampshire and Maine left.
Okay.
But I have walked from Springer Mountain, Georgia, about 20 miles into New Hampshire.
Okay. Well, stuff to do.
Cakewalk.
Yeah.
Cakewalk.
Easy.
Almost at the end. We're at the finish line.
So I'll leave it to do you tell that story in the podcast? I'm not sure if you tell the story of
No, she sent it to us in an email.
I know. Well, I'm going to get
there.
Sorry. Yeah. So I don't think you told us in the podcast, but after the podcast, you had sent us a beautiful email where you explained where your code name came from, and you said some other wonderful things in the email, and it was so special to us because we were new at doing this, and we were very. I'll speak for myself. I still was like, does this matter? What we're doing? Does it matter? And when you sent us that email, it really touched us because it was like, wow. It mattered, and it mattered to you, and it does matter to people, and we ended up printing them and framing them for all of us because it was just I think that was for me that first season where I was like, wow, this is going to be something, and it is important. And so I just want to thank you for that. I don't know if I've ever told you that.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah.
I do think we got a lot of initial questions when we were starting up the podcast, thinking about the audience. Like, what does the audience want to know? What are they taking away? Why are they going to replace a podcast in their rotation to listen to Iron Butterfly? And I think we had discounted a bit the effect that it would have on the guests.
Yeah.
And so I think it was kind of part of our realization of this is worthwhile for numerous reasons, not just because we're educating young listeners or inspiring young women, but also because we're helping amazing women document their histories and tell their stories. So I think that was a very special realization for us.
Well, I really appreciate what you do for this community and to highlight, all those stories. It's amazing. And oral history is just so compelling.
Mm-hmm.
We leave every recording, and now I'm gonna cry. Gosh, I held it back before.
You were close.
I was close. And we feel so lucky that we get to do this.
Yeah.
Like, every single time you're going to leave and we're going to sit here and we're going to say, I can't believe that they share this with us, that they trust us, that we're lucky enough to be the ones to do this because we think it's important. So anyway,
it is.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, Megan has stalled enough with her tears. So, Karen, we're going to finish with our final question, which, as you know, in keeping with the name of our podcast, Iron Butterfly, which was the code name for Eloise Page, the first female chief of station at CIA. If you had to give yourself a code name, what would it be and why?
Well, so the first time we had this, I thought long and hard, and I don't remember what I discounted. I think I had a hard time coming up with anything, and I chose Kumquat because I think it's an endearing term. I used to call my son my little kumquat. And, it's a bright, shiny orange fruit that is not commonly found, but apparently delicious. And I thought, as the girl who studied engineering, the girl in the army, I was always like, unlike all the others, just a little different. And, but yet I like to think of myself as bright and sunny. And so I thought, I like that, kumquat. And so when you hike the Appalachian Trail, if you're a thru hiker, you have a trail name, and it's supposed to be given to you by your fellow hikers. But I'm doing it in little segments. It's taken me years, and just just hasn't happened. And I was in New Jersey, and I was going northbound, and New Jersey, by the way, surprisingly nice hiking state. And I'm going northbound, and I hit a guy who's going southbound, and we're having a little conversation, and he shares his trail name, and he said, "What's yours?" And I kind of hung my head, and I said, "I don't have one." And he said, "Well, you've been doing this long enough because I've come from Georgia. I'm already in New Jersey." He said, "You can give yourself one." I said, "Okay, I'll think about it." And I go, and we part ways, and I get like 20 yards, and I turn around and I hollered. I said, "My code name or my trail name is Kumquat," and I think that was along the lines of the note I sent you. But I was like, "Yeah, my code name is Kumquat." So that's what I write in the little trail logs of the Appalachian Trail as I go along.
So if you have hiked or plan on hiking, look for Kumquat.
Look for
that's
Kumquat.
right. Yeah.
That's right.
Well, Karen, wow, there's so much to be thankful for, but thank you first and foremost for your service. Thank you for being a wonderful mentor to us. Thank you for again and again and again coming on this journey with us and telling your story.
It's a pleasure.
And we're just so thankful for you.
Thanks, Megan. And I appreciate what you and Katie are doing. I mean, truly, and your leadership and initiative. Holy cow. I was pretty good at doing things that other people told me to do in the Army, take the hill or whatever, but never like, you know what? I'm going to start a podcast. I mean, I'm just really so impressed with your energy and initiative.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for always making time for us. We love you.
Thanks. I feel the same.
Thank you for listening to a special episode of Iron Butterfly Podcast, which ventures inside the world of our documentary, The Power We Hold, Stories from Women Spies. We might be coming to a film festival near you. To follow along on our journey, follow us on YouTube or Instagram, or visit our website at www.ironbutterflymedia.com. And if you like the show, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Stay fierce, and we'll talk next time.